Peace be with you. Welcome to the Institute of All Intelligent Life. I'm Alan Kiesler, and today is Friday, the 4th of November, 2016, Jumu'ah Mubarak. And we are continuing our very interesting. So I have come outside again because our connection was cut off, and I had the suggestion to move somewhere else to try to get a better signal, so I've done that again. Hopefully I can go back inside into the Institute classroom and keep the signal, because I do want to show you some more pictures, which will be hard to do from outside. So I'm going back in. I don't know why we keep having all these connection problems, but let's hope we can keep the signal for now. All right. So we are going to discuss the structures on the moon. And these are from early photographs that were taken both by Russian and American probes that went to the moon even before the moon landings in 1969. So I'm going to proceed quickly because I don't know what's going to happen. I hope the signal stays this time. But these are also from this book, Ascension Mysteries by David Wilcock. This is going to be reversed, but this is the same book I've showed you the last couple of days. And there are some extremely fascinating photographs here, which you may have seen before. These have been available on the internet for some time, but you may not have. And David Wilcock has put these together in his book, his fascinating book. And I'm just going to show you some of these photographs. So you may not recall, since you're younger than I am, but I recall how the Russians actually went out into space first before the Americans. There was a big hue and cry among Americans that how have the Russians beat us. And the Russians also sent a probe into space to the moon. And this was, of course, we know now from the secret space program about other. But here are some pictures I'm going to show you from the first, not the very first, but the second, perhaps, Russian probe to the moon. The first one was in 1957. That was the first probe into space. And 2 years later, after that Sputnik, Luna 3 was sent to the moon by the Russians. And they had a very, very, what we would consider pretty low-quality images, but the first images of the dark side of the moon when this Russian probe, Luna 3, went around the back. And in 1965, the Russians sent Zond 3, which made it to the moon in 33 hours. And the Russians focused at that time on photographing the backside of the moon, the dark side of the moon, especially that section that Luna 3 had missed. And here are a couple of pictures of that Zond 3 took. I hope that's okay. So this is, of course, immediately you'll notice, I think, over here, this tower. It's obviously a tower. So this has been studied. It's not an artifact of the light being reflected off somewhere, and of course it's perfectly perpendicular to the moon's surface here. But it's so shocking that this sort of information is hard to digest, just like you may be feeling information overload because of all the shocking information that we're getting. So this is shocking. This tower, if that's, assuming that's what it is, would be about 20 miles. That's like 30 kilometers tall. So that seems so impossible for us to imagine that we just reject that this could possibly be what it looks like. What do you think? Well, we know now from Secret Space Program insiders that there are bases, and there have been bases on the Moon and on Mars and other moons in our solar system, and in fact in other stellar systems also, on the planets around other stars. There have been bases for millions of years built by extraterrestrials on our own moon as well. So with that understanding, we can, and those the technologies of those races were obviously much more advanced than we are yet, in order to be able to travel all over the galaxy. And so a 20 or 30 kilometers tall, 20 miles tall tower is not unbelievable when we understand what advanced technology they had. So, but back in 1965, that was before the moon landing, this was just impossible to imagine. So that picture, even though people saw it, they couldn't quite believe what it really was. Now there's another very interesting picture also taken by Zond 3, the same Russian space probe, which shows something else. And this, again, is something it's not quite as clear as that tower, but you'll see it's visible pretty clearly. Even, I hope it's visible to you as it is in the book, otherwise you'll have to get this book. So if you look down in the lower right-hand corner of this picture, right down here, I hope you can see that. I'll try to zoom in on it here, and hopefully we don't. There, you can see that little bump. Actually, it's a huge bump on the surface of the moon, which looks sort of like a dome. You can't really see it very well here, but David Wilcock does provide a close-up of that dome, which, there it is. If we turn this a little so it's straight up and down. So this picture was taken by the Zond 3 Russian moon probe in 1965. So what is it? Again, at that time, it wouldn't have been imaginable to anybody, well, except those people in the secret space programs who knew about this and who had actually, human beings had been on the moon before then, but as far as the generality of NASA scientists and Russian scientists also who weren't privy to this secret space program information, this was inconceivable. How could such a huge dome, again, this would be, I'm trying to remember the exact figure, but many miles, many kilometers high, this dome. And we now know, of course, as I've mentioned in the past in these classes, that transparent aluminum, there is a way of manufacturing aluminum which makes it extremely strong, and sometimes it's transparent, sometimes it's solid black, but it's so durable that it lasts and has lasted for millions of years. And as I mentioned more than one time in these classes, the ancient builder race, the name that's given to this very, very ancient civilization that was present on our planet and on other planets and moons of our solar system and other stars also, the systems around other stars. This ancient builder race perfected this aluminum manufacturing technique, which is quite clear to us now that that's what this dome was built out of. And I guess we would naturally wonder, what are this big tall tower used for? What was this aluminum dome used for? So I think there are plenty of possibilities for what that tower could have been for. just like we build towers for a variety of reasons, for guiding ships, like airplanes. Airports have towers which are used for helping to guide the craft, so spaceships also could have structures like that. And the dome could be just like we sometimes build domes, or we can certainly imagine big domes under which people could live, because the moon's atmosphere is so thin that it's not possible to live on the surface, for most species anyway, certainly for us and probably most other species. And living under a dome, a whole city, a whole large city could be built under a huge dome like that, and people could live there. And they could see the sun because it's transparent aluminum. They could enjoy living under the sunlight. And so that's a good guess as to what that dome was. It was actually built by a highly advanced, technologically extremely advanced civilization that could build these huge, huge structures. So, interesting. Now, I'm hesitant to go on with this because I know I felt the same way when I first was introduced to this, and some of you responded yesterday, which indicates to me that this is sort of an information overload. We're getting so much here that is just so different than what we may have been taught that it's kind of hard to even accept all of this. But there's more. And of course the question comes up, well, why haven't we been told about this? Well, we now know that that NASA especially has been concealing this information. So we're going to go into a little bit right now about NASA's cover-ups, but the earlier ones, they weren't covering up so much in the very beginning. So the Lunar Orbiter was one of NASA's early moon probes, and this was just a couple of years, I think. Let me just think a second. I'm trying to get the exact date here, but anyway, it was about 1966, when the U.S. was able to send its first probes to the moon, the lunar orbiters, which of course nobody landed, but they sent the probes around the moon. And this is one of the most significant photographs from the lunar orbiter 2. Shocking. And why we haven't investigated this more, why it hasn't been made more well known. This was a photograph. This is a NASA photograph that was taken by the Lunar Orbiter 2, and you can see from the shadows that obviously some very, I don't know why I'm not getting the proper focus, it doesn't seem to be focusing here, but you can see anyway that very clearly the shadows created by some towers, or actually these are obelisks, as you can see very clearly from the largest one. These are towers that have a pointed top, just like the famous Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. is a very tall obelisk, and ancient Egypt was famous for building obelisks. So we had lost the connection there for a minute, and our connection is weak. I hope it's not too pixelated, but probably it is. But I'm just going to show you. So the Russians also studied this and published actually some information about that structure, those structures, and their geometric arrangement. This is a publication, you can see the Russian language written there, from a Russian Technology for Youth publication, and you can see that he has studied these obelisks, which were photographed by that lunar orbiter, and interestingly, the geometric arrangement of these objects on the moon corresponds precisely with the arrangement of the 3 great pyramids in Egypt. That is, the relationship that they have to each other is just like the arrangement of the pyramids, the famous Great Pyramid and the other 2 large pyramids in Cheops in Egypt. So this is on the moon. who did it. It's not a natural. It's obviously not a natural. It's obviously been constructed by somebody. So why was this not publicized more? This information was available back in the 1960s, but somehow we just have forgotten about it, or we haven't studied about it, or it's been kept from us. What do you think? All right, there's more coming in just a minute. But I think the most important point that we should make now is that NASA has obviously been lying and has been preventing us from understanding what's really going on the moon. And one of the clearest examples of this is how they airbrush out, or they block off parts of pictures which show these structures. And I would highly recommend, if you hadn't done it yet, I've mentioned this before, you go to disclosureproject.org, www.disclosureproject.org, and that is a organization started by Stephen Greer, which has had a number of important events, but the earlier one that was most important was in 2001, which was a press conference held at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., in the United States. And there were many, many witnesses, secret government witnesses, that is, people who had been working in secret government programs, and others, including airline pilots who had seen UFOs, and FFA, that is Federal Aviation Agency officials who had known about extraterrestrial flights and whose data had been stolen. That is, they may have had tapes of the radar operators' communication with an airplane in which they said, "Oh, I've seen this." They had photographs, and then those were all taken away from them. But this information is all, other examples are there also of witnesses, military witnesses, who testified that they had actually gone to the site where a UFO had crashed, and they had recovered the bodies even and the parts of those craft. So that is a very, very important event in 2001. It's on the disclosureproject.org website. So please review that, because one of those witnesses, her name was Donna Hare, that's the name she used in interviews, and she testified that she had been working in a facility, NASA facility, and one of her co-workers once, who was involved in looking at the original photographs that had been taken by the lunar missions, and his job was to airbrush out, to remove evidence of non-natural structures on the moon that appeared in the NASA photographs. And he was so distressed by having to do this that when she happened to meet him at one point, he blurted this all out to her, that he's doing this, and showed her some of the photographs. And he was so distressed he just had to get it off his chest. So of course she could understand immediately that something's wrong here. He's not supposed to be telling me this, and she became a little fearful. And when she testified also, she was afraid, as many of those witnesses were, because unpleasant things have happened. In fact, people have been killed when they reveal information like this. But there's a lot of evidence that photographs, which we're going to look at a few of them, were destroyed, removed, hidden, or airbrushed. The insignificant parts were airbrushed out. So let me just show you a couple of the photographs from some of these these are NASA photographs, which the original was often obscured. And I'm just going to show first one example here. Okay, here we can see two examples. I hope the focus and pixelation is not there, so you can see this clearly. You can see in the center here is a glowing dome, or a highly reflective dome that's white. And that's taken from this picture here on the right. And here is the same picture. This is actually a picture that was obtained, I'm going to go into that some detail, that was obtained later. And this is the original NASA picture. Not the original one, this is the one that NASA released. And this is actually the original picture. So this little object right here was removed. It's not there. So this is just one example of the sort of thing that has been going on for many, many years, for decades, with NASA photographs of the moon. Here's another one. This is obviously not a natural. Does that look natural to you, those perfectly parallel lines? Again, this is a close-up of just a small portion of a picture that was released by NASA. But this is a very, very interesting story about this particular. This is NASA's official number of the photograph. And what's interesting is that many different photographs by different people under this same number. That is, what does this mean? This means that clearly that NASA had taken many photographs of this part of the moon, and they were all cataloged under one number, and that number evidently was supposed to be kept secret. There was supposed to be a confidential file or something of these. And many, many years later, when people started, well, actually, again, it was Richard Hoagland, who I mentioned yesterday, is well known for his research on especially Mars, on the structures on Mars. But Richard Hoagland found out that there was a completely black negative of this one particular photograph on NASA's catalog. So he wondered, that's funny. Most people would think, oh, it was a failed photograph. But Richard Hoagland decided to look into it, so he ordered this picture, and the picture that he received, the negative he received, was not black. It was a picture taken of the moon. And so he noticed that anyway, I won't go into the details of that photograph, it's not so important, but there were some interesting things about the photograph, and I'll just show you one. This isn't quite so shocking as some of them, but it's pretty clear that this is not a natural object. It's just a triangular shape. Again, this is the crater, which has a clear triangle. It looks highly unlikely that would be the natural structure, just this almost perfectly equilateral triangle. So Richard Hoagland was intrigued by this, and he began talking about it, and he began studying that painting and that photograph, and he found there were some square craters on it. There were things that did not look natural at all. So he began talking about it. So one of the people who heard him speak about this decided he would also order that photograph to look at it for himself, and he received a different photograph from NASA under that same number. So this is what I mentioned, perhaps it wasn't so clear, that different people then, a number of different people, or a number of different times, people ordered that photograph, and they received a number of different photographs. So it's quite clear that somehow NASA had taken many photographs of that area and cataloged them all under one number, and maybe many, many years later, the secret that was behind it was forgotten, or somehow the evidence that had been classified came out in this strange way, that all these different people were getting different photographs under the same, supposedly the one number for the one photograph. So There are many photographs here which I can show you one or two more, but they're not quite so clear, but I will show you one or two more. This is another photograph which, again, now with, of course, computer enhancing techniques, we can bring out details that were not so obvious before. And here we have, sorry, I'm having a little trouble here again. Okay, here is, this is a photograph of the lunar surface, and you can see in the background, it's only visible here, it looks like there are parallel lines there. Now, actually what happened here was they enhanced the photograph to bring out these structures. And you can see that there, it looks sort of like a building with 3 columns or 3 pillars there. So this is just, I mean, again, I'm apologizing that it's not real clear what's going on, but this is an official NASA photograph which by enhancing you could enhance the contrast and you can see that something's there which is not visible in the other ones. So this is evidently, this is that same transparent aluminum material has been used to build these structures. The main point I'm just trying to make is that with a little bit of enhancement, you can see something there that was not visible in, in the original one that NASA released, that is. So, sorry, I keep having problems with the connection here and the signal, but I'm just going to end the moon that show tampering, or that show interesting features. The next one, this is all from David Wilcock's book, is a photograph of an astronaut. This is Harrison Schmitt, Apollo 17, and you can see here that there's a darker area here, which means that somebody had blacked out whatever is there right behind the astronaut. You could hardly notice this on the original, but again with enhancement that became visible. So NASA has been removing things from their photographs by airbrushing them or by blocking them out like that. And finally, I'll just show you this photograph here, which has this structure on it. This is another photograph. Actually, this photograph was missing. That is, NASA said that it was missing. But when the original was obtained, the reason why it was so-called missing is because it had this structure in it. So what is that? And if you look at the close-up here, it looks very much like a solar panel. If you see the angle of that, that again clearly is not a natural structure. Okay, I think that's enough. Just to give you an idea, again, let me recommend that you get this book by David Wilcock called The Ascension Mysteries, and it's full of incredible information about the real facts behind these space programs, the secret space programs, and there's a lot of other very important information in that book. So let me just check the time here. Yes, it's our half hour is up. So I'm going to check and see if there are any questions or comments. And please, don't freak out, as we say. Don't allow all this information to make you just clam up and close up your mind and say, this is too much for me to take. Please consider and meditate, pray, try to be open to what the truth is, because it may just seem too shocking. Why haven't we heard about this before? It may seem contrary to our ideas that we have held for our whole life. But please, I'm begging you, keep an open mind, try to understand the truth, and get these books if you possibly can. Order this book and the other books that I've mentioned and that I've been using here. So let's see, starting from the beginning here. Of course, anyone who says good morning, I'm happy to say good morning back to you, but I'm not going to refer to those. Do you believe in a black hole? Well, yes, black holes are, not difficult to understand. They are places where gravity has become so heavy that even light cannot escape. Of course, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by black hole, but that's the common definition. Camila Danielson has posted a comment. Here's pictures online. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I won't look at that now, but all of you can look at that. Some pictures online of these same things that I'm showing. Thank you very, very much, Camila, for posting that. Mohsin Iqbal asks, Sir, is there any relationship between pyramids of Egypt and aliens? Yes. I've talked about this very clearly in the past few days, past couple of weeks, that the pyramids were built by, we even know their name, Ra, who is a social memory complex, that it's a group of people from Venus who are millions of years more advanced than we are, and they came to the Earth. They landed on the Earth 11,000 years ago and in Egypt, and they came several times, and they built the Great Pyramid, and they built some of the other pyramids, and the other people may have built some more too, but they were the ones who utilized this technology, because on their own planet of Venus, when they were in third density, that is when they were about the level of development that we're at now, they were helped by some sixth density beings with pyramid technology. That is, pyramids are very powerful in channeling energy and can be used in healing, which is the main reason why the people who came to Venus and helped them used those pyramids for healing. So that group of people from Venus came here, and they wanted to use the pyramids for the same sort of healing structure, a healing process, but the Egyptians, the Earthlings, unfortunately, could not use the technology as well as the people from Venus had, and they misused them and created a elite group of priests and rulers, and it was meant for everybody. So the group Ra left after having built the pyramids, and a little disappointed, but they are back again now, and they are helping us now to get through this transition that our planet is now making from third density to fourth density. So if you haven't been hearing these classes and these terms are unfamiliar, what does third density mean, what does fourth density, what does sixth density mean, you can go back and review the classes. But yes, they certainly were. I don't like the word aliens. Of course, they were from other planets, but they're people just like we are. And Sir, how did you learn Urdu, and what made you interested to learn? I was born and raised in South Asia. I was a resident of Pakistan from 1947 to 1965. So I learned Urdu how? Just like most Pakistanis, by speaking it as a child. Imtisal Kadir has written, I don't understand why Russians didn't make it public on official level. Well, the Russians actually have, especially in recent years, publicly made information about extraterrestrials available. On Russian television, there have been shows which clearly reveal all this information that we're talking about now. David Wilcock, whose book I'm using today in the last few days, appeared in those Russian TV documentaries. So the Russians have officially, publicly come out with this disclosure about extraterrestrial presence. Now, why they didn't back then in the 1950s and 1960s, well, it was a communist government. They were keeping their secrets, just like we were keeping, the Americans were keeping their secrets. So, but it's very, very wonderful that the Russians are now publicizing a lot of this information, And you may have seen it. Putin is actually a very good man. The mass media, the world Zionist-controlled media, is trying to portray him as evil, but he is working together with good extraterrestrials and is trying to promote the real knowledge of what's going on in our world, and he's trying to, and he is successfully fighting against the cabal, the so-called Illuminati. So the Russians are actually getting help from extraterrestrials, and they are much better than the Americans in terms of disclosing this information. So back in the Soviet days, they may not have been doing it, but now they are. So we have a question from Salma Aziz Mirza. Why you and others are trying to open it up now? Is it the most important thing that we should know? What is the significance of having knowledge about alien life? Is there any way these aliens will affect our lives more than we can do? Very good question. Thank you very, very much. There are several questions. First of all, why am I and others trying to open it up now? Is it the most important thing that we should know? It certainly is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing for us to understand right now. And why are we doing this? Because there is going to be a big transformation in human society very soon. The transformation from third density to fourth density, as I've talked about over the last few weeks, is happening now. In fact, it was supposed to happen a few years ago. It was scheduled to happen a few years ago, but we were not ready for it, so it has been postponed. As I have explained, the fourth density means telepathic abilities, other psychic abilities, which are naturally latent in all human beings, but it has to be cultivated and developed. That is going to become common. In the fourth density, that is a common feature. And world peace will be established. The deception of the governments, the corruption of the governments will be exposed and stopped. And this is going to happen very quickly. So it hasn't happened yet only because we're not ready for it. So an important part of that information is our true history. Our true history has been concealed from us. And the existence of alien civilizations, the existence of people from other planets and other star systems who have been visiting us for thousands and even millions of years, that information is all part of this knowledge that we need to know in order to make it easier for us to face this transformation. So people sometimes say, well, why don't we know about this? Well, we do know about it, but we may not understand it very well because many books, scriptures, talk about the day of judgment, and they talk about it coming in the future. And for those of you who have studied it, you all would know that the things that are going on in the world are clearly indications that this is the time of that day of judgment. So that day of judgment doesn't mean the end of the world, as some people think, but it means the end of the old age, the end of that 75,000 year cycle, and the beginning of a new cycle, which is fourth dimensional life. So let me just review these questions. So what is the significance about having knowledge about alien life? I think specifically it's important because the technology, for one thing, as well as the philosophy that people from other planets have been teaching us, are transformative. They will help us a lot in making this transition. The law of one knowledge, or Tawheed, which is that we are all part of each other, we're all inseparable from each other. We should all work together in love and harmony, because what we do to others is what we're doing to ourselves. So we should treat other people just the way we would want to be treated, because we really are they. They are not different from us. We are the same consciousness, individuated, but we're not separate. So we are, whatever we do to other people, we're actually doing to ourselves. So that knowledge, that understanding of Tawheed, or of the oneness of all existence, that is very important for us to understand. So that knowledge is there. And then, of course, the technology to travel throughout space, to other stars even, that is important for us when we enter into galactic life. We become part of that civilization. We've been sort of quarantined, and we've been misled by our leaders who are trying to prevent us from knowing that, because they want to control our planet. And when this knowledge comes out, they won't be able to. So that's why this is so important. And is there any way these aliens will affect our lives more than we can do? Well, no, we can affect our lives also. They are not there to save us, but they are there to help us understand what's really going on so that we can save ourselves. They're not going to do it for us. We are going to have to develop this understanding, this awareness, this knowledge, this conviction, and this determination ourselves to bring about this change. And the most important things, as I've said many times, are to be kind to others, to be loving, to be forgiving of others and of ourselves, to accept things as they are and not try to force things to fit into some idea we may have. We should just accept reality, which may be different from what we've thought in the past. So that sort of openness and loving mood and being kind to others is one aspect, and the other very important aspect is to practice meditation, prayer and meditation, which makes the mind peaceful and opens us up to higher inspiration. So those things, we are getting help from aliens, we are getting help from our space brothers and sisters, but ultimately we can do it. We have to do it ourselves. So again, Saima Aziz Mirza has said, Putin is a great man, spiritually inspired. From the way he talks, is Putin getting help from good aliens? Yes. Putin is in communication with good extraterrestrials and getting help from them, getting guidance from them, and he is cooperating with them. Unlike most of the American government leaders, they refused. This is a long story. Very, very briefly, I'll tell it again. You may have heard it before from me or from other sources, but in the 1950s, after the first nuclear weapons were developed by the United States, and they started doing more and more tests, which were causing major disruption, not just the radiation effects, but the effects on the fabric of time and space of these weapons that transform matter directly into energy is considerable, which the Americans were not aware of at all. So in about 1952, I believe it was the year, President Eisenhower of the United States was approached. He was informed that an extraterrestrial group wants to meet him, and he did meet them. And they offered, basically they offered a lot of help, advanced technology, solving the problems of the world, which unfortunately Eisenhower and his aides did not accept, because the condition they made was that they would have to give up their nuclear weapons and stop this nuclear testing program. So unfortunately, very unfortunately, they were suspicious. The Americans were suspicious. Why are they wanting us to give up our nuclear weapons? And so they rejected that. Interestingly, the same group of aliens, evidently, or some aliens, approached the Russians and shared with them. They made the same offer to them. The Russians also did not accept it, but they gradually did. And now the Russians have accepted the help of that, or of other good aliens, as you're calling them, benevolent, kind, sixth density perhaps, very wise and loving people from other planets, who may be the same people or may not be the same people that had been approaching the Americans and the Russians back in the 1950s. But what happened in the United States, and maybe in Russia, I don't know what happened in the Soviet Union, but in the United States we do know what happened was, after Eisenhower and his aides refused that offer of that treaty, some negative extraterrestrials came and approached them and offered them technology, and did not insist that they had to give up their nuclear weapons, but did make some other agreements that they wanted to use human beings in some experimentation, some genetic experimentation especially, and they wanted to harvest animals as well as, they wanted to use human beings' DNA as well as animals' DNA from our planet, and the Americans agreed to that. It may be that they were also, in fact I'm sure it is, they were also pressured by the German secret space program. That is, the Nazi Germans had, although they lost the Second World War, they were able to create colonies under the ice in Antarctica, under the ground in South America, and on the moon and on Mars. We're talking about the 1940s, 1950s, before the Americans. So the Germans then also put pressure on the United States, and there were many German scientists who were taken to the United States by the CIA in the famous Operation Paperclip. So the Germans were able to really infiltrate. And so together, those two factors, those two factions, the Germans and the extraterrestrials who were working with the Germans, they pressurized the United States and induced them to accept a treaty, make a treaty in which they got advanced technology, and of course all this incredible technology we've gotten in the 20th century and 21st century has come from extraterrestrials mostly, everything from computers to lasers and many other things like Teflon too. So in conclusion, let me just end by saying that the help that Putin is getting is from good aliens, yes, and he is cooperating with them and trying to push forward this agenda of helping humanity become aware of what's really going on so that we can become ready for this transition or this ascension. All right. Oh, we have a comment from a Russian here. I can't read Russian, but I can see the Russian writing. So this person is saying, it is true, that is. And he is also asking, is it true that Hare Krishna religion is under control of Illuminati and God Krishna is an entity from Pleiad? I don't believe the Hare Krishna religion is under the control of the Illuminati. And God Krishna is an entity from Pleiad. I don't know where Krishna may be from. They call it Goloka, which is a planet which is said to be in the transdimensional world. I'm not sure. But it is certainly very, very difficult to understand the truth of these matters. So the more we can ourselves purify our hearts, the more we can meditate, the more we can get free of the Illuminati's mind control, false information, the better we will be. So this is very interesting that we have a Russian person agreeing about Putin getting help from good aliens, and has some other interesting. Okay, Gemma Art is next. An interesting understanding I just received is that listening to your information, I can say that each one of us keep an alien in us, but most of our lives we don't or can't connect to him, her, because of our low level of consciousness. Okay, I can accept that. What do you mean by an alien in us? Often we say that there's an angel with us, a guiding angel or a guardian angel. So I guess angels are probably extraterrestrials or aliens in one sense. So I would agree with you that yes, we do each have with us a higher being. It may be, a deeper part of ourself also, but since we are all one, either way we describe it, it really doesn't matter. But there certainly is an intelligence that each of us have within us which gives us guidance. And most of us don't or can't connect with that intelligence because of our low level of consciousness. I agree with you completely on that. But let us meditate. Let us pray. Let us follow some sort of spiritual practice so that our level of consciousness can be raised, and have a good, healthy diet. There are a lot of information that good extraterrestrials are sharing with us to help us improve our life and to help us escape from the cabal or the Illuminati's attempts to control us and to deceive us and to make us weak and sick. A lot of even our food is poisoned, and our atmosphere is being poisoned, our water is being poisoned. So this is all part of a war. It's really a war against the people of Earth by this Illuminati who is controlled by evil extraterrestrials, the same ones who made the agreement with the United States government and gave technology in exchange for, well, they extracted the promise from the Eisenhower administration that they would keep, that we human beings would keep secret their presence, which is the main reason why we haven't known about extraterrestrial presence, is because our governments agreed to keep their presence secret. And now, of course, that's changing and the truth is coming out. What is your view about the murder of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and Benazir Bhutto? Please tell us a bit. Well, not only in Pakistan but throughout the world, many leaders have been assassinated, especially by the CIA, when they would not agree to do what the Americans wanted. It was actually not just the CIA, it was a whole international military-industrial complex, multinational corporations, especially oil corporations and energy corporations and banking, especially corporations. They all had their agenda to create a one-world government to take over the world, and they basically did manage to control almost all the governments of the world. And anyone who didn't agree to their agenda would be pressurized, would be removed if possible from office, and if they couldn't remove them, they would just kill them. So I have been told, this is pretty confidential information, but I won't reveal the source, but a friend of mine who has connections in the military told me that Benazir Bhutto was actually murdered by United States, was behind it, because she was not going to do what the cabal wanted. She was a little independent. And her father also was obviously very independent of the Americans. He was trying to get Pakistan, he did succeed in getting Pakistan allied more with China, and China was a very important factor even at that time, and now even much more important. So even Liaquat Ali Khan, who knows General Zia also, when they would not do exactly what they were being told to do, they were probably killed by the CIA and other, related organizations. So that's my view. I'm not sure about the details of all of those things, but this is just a general picture. Okay, I think our time is probably up. We are going to move into, well, there's a little bit more about this topic we're talking about now, but next week we're going to move into the different alien species and what they look like, where they're from. All this information is coming next week. So tomorrow is our Urdu chat at 6:30 p.m. Urdu time, 6:30 a.m. in California, 1:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And that is tomorrow, Saturday. It'll be a conversation in Urdu. I'll summarize what I've talked about this past week. And Sunday there will be no class. And Monday, again, let me remind you, on Monday the class will be at 7:30 Pakistan time, 7:30 in the evening, because here in the United States, in many states, we are switching from daylight savings time to regular standard time, so that the time will remain the same here in California at 6:30, but it will change to 7:30 in Pakistan and to 2:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. That's starting on Monday. So hope to see you tomorrow for the Urdu chat, or on Monday. And after talking a little bit more about the information in David Wilcock's book Ascension Mysteries, we're going to move into the study of the different species of alien life, of extraterrestrial life, of our space brothers and sisters from different sources, and it's very fascinating as we go into these details. Okay, thank you all very, very much. May God protect us all.